catch that? Leslie's my personal assistant. She's invisible and terrible at her job. Leslie! If you somehow didn't recognize me, I'm Rachel Joravsky, that gay Jewish comedian, coming at you live from the bath. For many, this year has been one of great loss and pain, but for me, well, it has been marked with unfettered success as I, along with 10.1 million others, have been carefully selected for the very prestigious, very exclusive arts fellowship known as Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. Every week, my tall, sexy, war crime committing sugar daddy, Uncle Sam, bestows me with endless funds so that I can create an iconic piece of Americana culture. Soap. I'm Rachel Joravsky, and I guess you could say I'm thriving off the government!
Rachel, thank you so much for that amazing intro. Audience, this is the first time that we're in person in the 14th Street White Theater since January of 2020. So we apologize for the music stands, but we're a little rusty on the live performance element. I'm Laura Beatrix Newmark. I'm the director of LABA in New York, and I'm also the producer of the Nasty Women, a Night of Female Resistance comedy show. And I am joined by the amazing woman you just saw. Take it away.
I'm Rachel Joravsky, queer power Jewess, comedian, the creator of Rachel Joravsky is Thriving Off the Government, which is the clip that you just saw. Thriving Off the Government it was just a little peek into my psyche, my 2020-2021 psyche. I feel like it's just kind of like showing everybody where I was at, and just very much inspired by the havoc around me. It's great to be here. Great to be chopping it up. Two Midwestern Jewesses, where's our dip? I feel like we need like a good dip.
No, it's true, like an onion dip. I feel like maybe some Doritos next time.
For our next.
Rachel, one thing you mentioned was being part of an exclusive fellowship.
Yes.
In that clip, and you are part of an exclusive fellowship, and that is LABA, the LABA Fellowship. For those of you who don't know, LABA is a fellowship that is rooted in classic Jewish text, and we bring together a diverse group of artists in lots of different fields to study together, be inspired. We pick a theme each year, and this year's theme is chosen. So Rachel, tell us how you feel. How do you feel chosen?
How do I feel well, I've obviously always felt chosen in my Jewishness, but as you know, I've never had a formal Jewish education. I'm just an uneducated Jew. I'm like that. Now I guess, I suppose after all of our study, I've become a bit more of a formally educated Jew, but I'm sort of that mix of feeling very, very Jewish every day of my life with little to no religious knowledge. Though, in all fairness, some religious knowledge has developed through the years. But I think that, in terms of, my Jewish identity, and I don't know if you can relate, but I've always felt chosen for, a degree of angst. Just some sort of angsty, be it, horrible sinuses, or horrible stomach, or just kind of a little bit of existential dread, so I think that there's sort of that that degree of Jewish chosenness mixed with a little bit of exclusivity, oh yes, I am Jewish and have a permanently running nose, you know what I mean, proud, there's a pride there.
And you're reminding me of the being chosen for lactose intolerance, or being chosen for OCD, or being chosen. I don't experience this, but I know that a lot of the Jewish population experiences being chosen for not handling alcohol well. Which is sort of an interesting.
What is that? Just being a lightweight, or
No, there's supposedly there is an Ashkenazi Jewish gene or chemical or something that that doesn't process well.
Interesting.
So you can have the gin and tonic and be out for a week.
Oh,
like,
wow.
it's sort of a... But then at the same time, and I think we can study this, and this sort of relates to my next question, is what have you found shocking about what we've studied? And I think in a follow-up to that question, one thing I think about sort of the Talmud in particular is it does seem like they're drunk.
Yeah.
Drunk as skunks. I mean, really drunk in the commentary they write, because it doesn't really make sense sometimes, or it's really outlandish, or I don't know. What's been shocking to you?
It's buck wild. I forget the piece that we studied at our last session that was just so gay to me. It was just so
Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan.
Yes, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, which was that a Talmudic sort of
I think
discourse?
it was a Talmudic discourse.
It was, and I was just reading it, and I was just like, this is love. This is like the sort of interface between like love and lust and like obsession, but we don't have to call. And I remember I got pushback from Ruby
At first.
and then I was like, it's not like this piece is like LGBTQ approved, it gets the big stamp. Like it's not like it's falling under the umbrella. I feel like when I think of queerness, and I feel like I'm pushing this at almost every LABA study, it's almost about like widening the umbrella until it breaks, you know what I mean? And just kind of revealing the queerness in everything and everyone. Everyone's gay, there I said it. But
I think you point out the gender fluidity of what we discussed, and how at that time there was a large amount of gender fluidity in terms of what direction people were going, and that it wasn't a big deal. Like, that was not the major story. I mean, part of the story was their love, but part of the story were a lot of other things. So it wasn't actually it was interesting.
Yeah, I know, and I feel like I felt like I was always a very gender fluidity is so interesting. I always felt like a gender fluid kid who then just sort of like landed in female land. You know what I mean? But I was definitely, like into wearing boys' clothes, and then it's like, well, when does that behavior then, when you get old enough, like have to be a thing, have to be called a specific thing or identity? But yeah, so I guess just all the queerness in the text, and also God, the God of God in the Torah is a nightmare. I feel like we talk about this in almost...
Well, you used a good term for this, the God of...
Oh, I said, well, I did say incel God. He's a God, it's a God of vengeance.
A God of vengeance. I think that was the term you used. Are we going to see that again? I feel like I remember you saying that, and then there was another story that was a little crazy.
Yes. I feel like it's just after every study session, and truly was not one to crack open a Torah at any point prior to LABA, which now I've enjoyed it greatly. I'm not sure, I feel like I'm convincing, I love Torah, I'm convincing the audience. But yeah, it just like this, all in so many of the stories we read, it's just like this manipulative, insecure, vengeful God, like loving and gracious God. Like, that is some Christian stuff, I feel.
Well, I mean, that's what, as Ruby said, we're not, there aren't saints. It's not, all the dirty, everything is exposed, right? We don't gloss over things.
Yeah.
In Torah, we're taught.
No, it's true. And so I think that is what's been so shocking, is it's just like, wait, I'm supposed to be obsessed, like, with this God, you know what I mean? Like, I feel that we live in a Christian nation, or at least I think so. And hey, I didn't get a high holiday off back in the Midwest. I consider that living in...
That's a weird thing about being in New York.
I know.
You get off for the high holidays.
Right. I know. So I consider this a Christian nation. And I'm just like, we're reading the text, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be enamored with this God. Like, this God sounds like my ex. You know what I mean? Like, so that, I think, was that was shocking, to just kind of run into that again and again. And then simultaneously, as a Jewish educator for kids, like, be telling similar stories, but framing God in such a different way. And it's like, my God, I'm like lying to these kids of like, how actually in the original essence, like, this figure is presented. So that's definitely been shocking. I also wanted to add to like this idea of chosenness. I feel very chosen as a creator and like as a comedian, and I feel like that can, like, in a sense, just sort of like the Jewish chosenness, it can kind of go both ways, of like go to a very angsty space, you know, of like, oh, I'm chosen for mediocrity. I feel like that's every like creator's fear, or like artist fear, is like, I'm chosen to be just fine. Not even like chosen for terribleness is kind of nice, because it's like you're so that,
Right, it's an extreme.
right. There's something behind that, but just chosen to be like, like what a disappointing feeling. So there's that sort of fear, and then I think in just like choosing to pursue comedy and art and, you know, these untraditional paths, it's like it's such it can be so brutal that it's almost like this must have been selected for me if I'm getting up every day and continuing at it. It's almost like I'm a sim. Yeah, did you play The Sims?
No, but I know. I mean, I've heard a little bit about it.
Okay. Don't get into it. It would be an epic waste of time. But you know, it's like I'm a sim, and there's someone else kind of willing me into each creative endeavor, no matter what sort of frustration comes with it, or joy, you know. I mean, that's kind of what gets you to keep doing it. But that was like another piece of chosenness. So and me, my secret belief that we're all actually Sims. You know, I feel like that's how you get canceled on the internet, is spreading beliefs like that.
So we were talking a little bit about studies, some of the shocking things. What have you found funny or humorous? And actually, last year's theme for LABA was humor, so we did sort of investigate this a little bit. But what have you, as a comedian, what has sort of sparked or made you think, wow, this is sort of batshit crazy / I think the rabbis are drunk when they're writing the Talmud. Like, yeah,
right. Well, definitely the commentary on the last piece we read was kind of batshit crazy, drunk rabbis just kind of like having fun with it. I actually found humor in Cain and Abel. I thought that there was something funny in that, but I don't even know if it's like supposed to be funny or if I was just like making a bit out of it in my head. And I even like, this was in one of our earlier sessions on Zoom, which is, I feel like was a time where it was easy to be like, I have a thought that I could say, and inhibition was definitely rampant on Zoom. But Cain and Abel, and this is just kind of showing my my lack of familiarity with the story. We read it a while ago. Cain, okay, which one's the favorite, Cain or Abel?
I mean, Cain's the firstborn, and I think the assumption is the firstborn is the favorite.
Right.
Yeah.
Cain's the favorite, but Cain, and it's the scene where, this is where what I thought was funny, is the scene where they're both bringing these sacrifices to God, and Abel brings the better sacrifice. And in my mind, I was like, he brought like, you know, the goods. He brought the goods, the firstling of, the firstling of the flock or something. It's just like some amazing sheep. And then Cain brings some wheat. But when we were talking about it with Ruby, he had mentioned that in other interpretations, it was like a piece of fruit. Like that was another sort of, a piece of fruit stood out to me. And so I thought that this was really funny. And you could, maybe even this is Talmud, what I'm creating right now is sort of my own version of the story, is that Cain didn't like pick a bad thing to bring as a sacrifice. He kind of just like forgot it was happening. And so I thought it was really funny, this idea that, like, you know, he shows up and he's like, oh God, okay, the sacrifice. And God's like, what do you have for me? And he's like, this wheat. So I thought that was humor.
Like you have like Gilbert Gottfried playing Cain.
Right.
It's like this sort of, he's like schleppy.
Right.
And,
totally. And he's like, the sacrifice, we had the thing today.
And Abel's like the Seth Rogen, who he's sort of cool. And
yes. And it's like, let's option this script. Right. But so that was something that I found when we were reading that story. I was like, oh, he didn't pick something bad. He just forgot the whole thing was happening. And I imagine that he just sort of like saw the first thing off the ground and just kind of grabbed it and held it up. So that was a piece of humor that stood out to me that maybe I created. I don't know that that's like innately a part of the story. But it stuck with me, and then I was like, how can I turn this into something? And are like people at large familiar enough with that story to like use it as a stand-up bit, which I'm not sure. Because here's the thing is like you can't go too Jewy unless you have the right audience, and that really is a fact. I've learned the hard way in terms of just people knowing the references and knowing what you're talking about. I had this, actually reminds me, I had this character that was like the first sort of Jewish mother from the Passover story. Have I told you about this before?
No, but this sounds right.
and I'm like, honestly, should I do this on the 25th? I hope everyone's coming. And she's just sort of like, I was up all night painting red on the door, you know what I mean? So that they'd pass over. She's like guilting her kid. And I wrote this as a sketch. It was like right around Passover for this a sketch group that I'm a part of. We used to perform over under St. Mark's. And it, when I say it fell flat on its face, I mean, it just, I almost like paused the whole thing and was like, do you guys know the Passover story? I'm very confused. I like casted this other Jewish guy in the group, and he was, we were like living for it, and everyone else just seemed wildly confused. But yeah, Jewish Passover mom, that's something I'll maybe workshop that character a bit more. Hey, maybe you'll see it. Maybe you'll see it on the 25th.
So speaking of that sort of reminds me a little bit of growing up as a Jew in the Midwest.
Yes.
The other fellowship that we are both part of is being a Midwestern Jew. So I was thinking about if you performed that in the Midwest, how that would play, which sort of reminds me of like when I got to New York, we both came here for college.
Yeah.
I thought it was like the coolest thing ever that there was kosher Chinese food, and it didn't even matter what it tasted like. It was the fact that there was like China Shalom or something, and like that, or that there were like menorahs in stores over Christmas. Like I'd never ever seen that.
Right.
I mean, there was a Christmas tree too, but there was a menorah. I mean, it was like what? So what? How have you found both performing in both places and also just your experience of being a transplant here and what that sort of brought out, or what that, like, going from a place that we were sort of minority Jewish in a lot of ways to a place where we're majority Jewish.
Definitely. Where are you from in the Midwest again?
Cincinnati, which is actually pretty southern, and you're from Chicago.
And I'm from Chicago, yeah. I mean, Chicago for sure has Jews, and especially the suburbs. But it's not, I mean, it's just like not as plentiful. You know, I was in Chicago this past week, and I was down in Hyde Park at Promontory Point, which is just along the lake, and I saw like a lot of Jews, and I was like, oh wow, I'm not used to seeing so many Jews like out and about, so like visible Jews out and about in Chicago. So I guess, yeah, just like growing up, it was a general feeling of just like sparseness, you know. It's like there's not a lot of us, and because there's not a lot of us, we like all kind of know each other. I mean, did you feel like you knew like all the Jews?
A little. You're just reminding me of a story though. I'm married to a guy from Manhattan, and we were in Cincinnati in my old neighborhood one on a weekend, and a group of Orthodox Jews were walking home from synagogue, and he thought they were Amish. He had no idea what they were. Wow. And I was like, they're Orthodox Jews. Like what like how are you?
Right.
And I think just contextually it seemed so odd to him growing up in Manhattan that there were like Orthodox Jews at this like suburb in the middle. They looked out of place a little bit, but like it was just a funny, and it just sort of reminded me of like when you grew up here, it's just you're on the street all the time. Like I feel like when you're in the suburbs, you're not. I don't know. It's not in your face in the same way, right? Yeah. I mean, I think it's like I love being part of a bigger group. Like it was hard growing up when people, you know. People didn't understand why you didn't celebrate Christmas, or there was sort of this like, well, I want to celebrate Hanukkah because you get a gift every night. And I was like, I don't know what family you're talking about, but I'm like, yeah, we got socks, like, or we'd go on a trip for winter break, and that was the Hanukkah gift. Like Hanukkah wasn't Christmas every night. Yeah. Like I think there was that myth a little bit.
Totally. I always have been curious of like what Orthodox Jews and Amish people, like what would that interaction look like, you know, like some aesthetic overlap, but like truly nothing
definite aesthetic overlap,
but truly nothing else.
But rigidity a little bit in like following a certain way of living. I think differently, but I feel like they're, maybe that's sort of
Just like no shared food though. Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
different
It's like definitely similarities sort of end at rigidness and aesthetic. But yeah, no, I mean, I grew up in the city of Chicago, so it was definitely city vibes. But I was a CPS Jew. All the CPS Jews kind of knew each other. Didn't get off for high holidays, which always felt like a flex of like, can't go to school, got the high holidays, which I kind of used as some sort of like token of, I don't know, something, just missing a day felt, and it was like an excused absence, so that kind of felt like a flex for my friends. Of course, then I'd show up to synagogue and like everything was wildly out of context because I never went.
Well, no, I mean, my kids go to a Quaker school and they're off for the high holidays.
Right.
Like, that feels funny to me.
Yeah.
Even now. Like, it's sort of wild. Like, other parents are trying to connect over what their kids are going to do during that day off, which was like, I mean, that's bonkers to me because, yes, we had to take a day off. We had to take a day off to fast. I mean, it wasn't like it was celebratory.
Right. Yeah. Although my family's fasting was interesting. Very interesting. We would eat into and my mom would be like, this is so wrong. She's not religious, but she was just like, this is fundamentally so wrong. My grandma, rest in peace, would have us like have a big dinner before the fast, but like it would go into the night. So it was like after, you were supposed to have stopped eating, and then you just skip breakfast.
So you were intermittent fasting.
Yes,
really.
It really was.
You were on that early train.
Truly. Skip breakfast and then do a break fast. And it's like, I'm pretty sure we're doing this hours early, but fine. So yes, very just unorthodox. But then truly coming to New York was like, I can imagine it's how people maybe feel when they go to Israel. I've never been to Israel, but it was just like, wow, there's so many of us, like everywhere.
And by the way, that is how I felt the first time I went to Israel. I was like, there's a mezuzah on every door.
Yeah.
In every hotel. The cab driver's Jewish. The barista's Jewish.
Right.
This person's Jewish. And it was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it's very weird.
Absolutely. And so much more like embedded in the culture and like the references. I feel like all of my Jewish, so much of I think I said this to you at my LABA interview. I moved to New York and I immediately became 10 times gayer and 10 times more Jewish, kind of overnight. It was really weird. But yeah, no, it's nice. I like it. Although I would not change a thing about coming up in Chicago. I didn't grow up around a ton of other Jews. I didn't get to do the bar mitzvah. So did you get a lot of?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not so much.
I didn't do the.
But I didn't do it, but I thought it'd be very funny to have T-shirts that said like, we joined with Laura as she read from the Torah and did the Horah. I was like, my name actually would have been a funny, like I could have played on that, but no, it wasn't a big circuit.
Hey, never too late to make the T-shirt.
You never.
Never. I like bring the T. I make it for you. Bring it to you as a gift.
No, not a big circuit.
And me either. And I grew up in this, but I wasn't around a lot of WASPs either. My dad is a really interesting guy. He's definitely got like democratic socialist vibes. Like he's like the OG thirsty white ally. Are you familiar with the term thirsty white ally? It's just like white people like trying to get it right, and really passionate about it. But he's very dogmatic, I think, in a good way, in that he recognizes that the United States is like foundationally a country built on segregation, and that people kind of racially just divide almost naturally just based on the way that this country works culturally. And so he was like, I don't want to add to that. And so he made a conscious effort to put me and my sister in predominantly black spaces so that we would kind of get a sense of like what it felt like to be a minority in a scenario. I mean, of course we were Jewish minorities, sure, this is a whole conversation about what is a minority, but just like being different, racially different from the greater context of what's around you. So consequently, like I feel everything I learned about being like a Jewish other was sort of through a black lens of like my peers. And, you know, as a kid, I was like, you don't want to be white. Being white was lame. So I always used to be like, I'm not white, I'm Jewish, which is truly something that would get you canceled today. But I think it just like, it got me thinking about identity and otherness at a young age. And then like, you know, years later when I come to New York and actually get to do like my Jewish exploration, you know, it sort of all those other details got filled out around this like very interesting kind of foundational identity blossoming. But yeah.
No, it's true. I mean, it's an interesting, I also didn't feel, I mean, I felt like I was a minority.
Yeah.
I mean, we are minorities as Jews. We are a very small percentage of the population. And I always never, I mean, to speak to being canceled, I just thought I was Jewish and that was different. Like,
Yeah.
and in the Midwest, it felt that way.
Yeah.
In a big way. And my friends were, by and large, Indian or Taiwanese or
Right.
not white.
Yeah.
Or Jewish, because
Right.
I feel like that felt comfortable.
Yeah.
And then you come to New York and it's like everyone, because Judaism is quite prevailing. Like I know in comedy, I feel like I'd go to comedy shows and so many times comedians would be like, I'm not Jewish, but like if I was Jewish, or I'm not Jewish, but like
Yeah.
my friend who's Jewish, like that was actually cultural capital, which
Right.
seemed funny to me.
Right.
Because that didn't feel relevant at all in the
Mm-hmm.
Midwest in that sense.
Yeah, no, it is true. Like people kind of just, it's more people just grasp at Jewish references more. They're kind of just like floating in the ether.
Or
way
Yiddish.
more.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, or like it was the first time that I'd been around Jews who were extremely Yiddishkeity, but had no other knowledge.
What does that word actually mean?
Like a real sense of Jewish culture, kind of.
Okay,
I think.
cool. All right. I would, okay.
And I like would be around friends who were super Yiddishkeity, even though they were totally secular, and
Yeah.
feel really uncomfortable. Like we'd be in a cab and they'd be throwing out like Yiddish, and I'd be like, tone it down. Like it felt weird.
Right.
I mean,
You're like, you're doing too much.
No, it's like it was interesting. I mean, it was just a whole different.
You're like, that's cultural appropriation.
No, it was. They do feel like different worlds in a lot of ways.
They do. No, they absolutely do. But I feel now that once you go, there's no going back. You know what I mean? Once you've tasted it, there's no going.
Tasted the New York or tasted
the New York Jewish culture. Yeah, like I don't know that I would be able to live in a place that wasn't this Jewishly populated. Yeah. So.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk about Midwestern Jewish identity, about LABA. As you have teased already, we have our first in-person theater performance that is happening on Friday, June 25th at 7 p.m. I think it makes sense that it's comedy that's bringing us back.
Yes.
The show, it's going to be at the 14th Street Y Theater. The show is called Chosen for Nastiness, a night of LABA comedy, and Rachel will be headlining.
I will.
In addition to showing a short film, of which you'll get a clip at the end that will tease that as well. And we will also be joined by two of our LABA humor fellows from last year. One is Charlie Buchholz. He's the stand-up comic, a rabbi. He hosts a podcast called Bad Rabbi. And the other is Willie Zabar, who's also a stand-up comic, and he hosts the new Zabar's podcast. And we are extremely excited that you are going to be bringing us back into live performance here.
I am so excited. I'm so excited to present Rachel Joravsky is Thriving Off the Government, my comedic digital short. Be there. Guys, you don't have anywhere else to be, although we do have a limited amount of tickets, so not everyone can come.
It will be live streamed.
It will be. Oh, perfect. Yes.
Yes,
So
live
that's
streamed and a small audience according to the social distancing measures that have been enacted. So why don't you set up our final clip, and thanks so much for joining us. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Enjoy this clip from Rachel Joravsky is Thriving Off the Government, and see you on the 25th.
Can't wait.
Hi, I'm Jane Lynch, America's favorite white lesbian who isn't Ellen. Never heard of me? You better have. This Pride, I'm teaming up with the Humane Society for our first annual Get Those Dykes a Dog Month. A very special month where we'll be giving free dogs to dysfunctional lesbian couples desperate for distraction from their failing relationship. Did you know that 1 in 10 lesbians are locked in a codependent, sexless, sister-wife-like arrangement? They're not breaking up, so you better get those dykes a dog. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Jane, what about the straights? Oh, what about the straights? The straights have everything. You really think they need a free dog? The answer's no. This Pride, the Humane Society, has given gays the gift of a Band-Aid solution. Oh, don't worry, little buddy. Come here, come here, come here. Thanks to you, your mommies are gonna be together forever. Either that or locked in a nasty doggy court custody battle where you'll be forced to pick an owner Airbud style. I love that movie. I'm Jane Lynch, and together, America, this Pride, we're gonna get those dykes a dog.
From the wreckage of your soul.